Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 84 of the Hardly Millennial podcast, where we are young, dumb, and full of
opinions.
Opinions. That's right. Hello, everybody. Two people with you today. My name is Adam.
I'm Matthew.
And we are your favorite Hardly Millennials. And
we're the ones you're going to get.
We're the ones you're going to get today. So to open up with, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, but it's been kind of in pop culture news, and that is the reactions to the new live action Sonic the Hedgehog trailer.
Oh my lord, we watched that yesterday.
We did, and oh boy.
Okay, all right, we could talk about that for a minute.
Yeah,
let's do that.
So first of all,
what do you think?
Well, my first initial reaction is what a lot of people's initial reaction was when we saw what live action Sonic looks like, and that is what the fuck.
It's a blue hedgehog.
It's a blue hedgehog. It's just
not Sonic.
It's not the Sonic we know and love. It's really funny actually with all this backlash that's been given for this movie, because the Sonic games, as we know, are like known to just be like janky,
super janky,
like games.
Oh, absolutely, they're frustrating. Mm-hmm. The controls are whack.
So
I don't even really know how he became such a phenomenon, Sonic.
You're right. I mean,
but he is. People love Sonic.
It must just be. I feel like it's one of those things where it's like the old Sega, like Genesis games of Sonic, people really enjoyed.
Maybe for their day, they were really badass.
Maybe well, I think that's exactly what it was. I think a lot of people grew up with it. So it's like every single time a new Sonic game comes out, they're like, all right, this one's going to be good. It's kind of like that discussion we had about Star Wars once, where I said, like, some guy was like, I had to go see episode 1 14 times to decide I didn't like it. Yeah. I feel like it's that same kind of mentality.
I feel you. It could definitely be that.
Where they play it and they're just like, oh, this is so bad. Hopefully the next one's better. So I guess it's pretty appropriate that there'd be so much backlash on a trailer.
I think that what really made the Sonic in the trailer look funky is the eyes. They didn't make the eyes big enough. They gave him like regular
that's
eyeballs.
Just it. They try to humanize him too much. They tried to make him look too much of this like
and he didn't
hybrid.
have the really big shoes. He needs to have like gigantic shoes.
Gigantic arms too. I mean, the whole thing with him was like small body, long lanky arms and legs, and then a big head. That's always been kind of his thing. And then, the big eyes, where the eyes weren't ever really separated either, right? They were just,
They were almost his whole face was eyeballs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And a lot of the other complaints people have is like with his teeth just look too much like human teeth, you know?
His whole face is just funky.
They tried to make some like Sonic human hybrid for the sake of a live action, and it just didn't do well.
But they didn't do that for Pikachu in live action.
Exactly.
Pokemon.
Well, that's because Detective Pikachu did it right. Yeah. It's like, and I was talking about this yesterday, where when you're making a live action of something like Sonic the Hedgehog, it's like you're already suspending so much disbelief watching something like that.
Yeah, let's just make him look like he does in the game, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you can add, more realistic aspects in other places of the movie. They did that with Dr. Robotnik, with Jim Carrey playing Kim.
Yes.
Which he's actually gotten a lot of positive responses. But
I'll tell you what, saying a few good things about the trailer. Mm-hmm. The effects look badass.
Yeah, I do
like when
agree.
He's running, particularly when he like curls up in a ball and does that lightning ball thing that he,
Yeah,
that looks really badass.
Yeah, I agree.
They did a great job with those effects.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, everything else other than Hedgehog looked like it was a great Sonic the Hedgehog movie.
Yeah, there were so I watched this other video today on YouTube of somebody who was just like breaking down the trailer, and there are a lot of other things that I personally didn't notice up front that I understand now why there are people who have so many issues with it. And it's not just the look of like Sonic, it was things you saw in the trailer. Like, for example, this main guy that we know is going to be, allying with Sonic at some point.
Right.
They introduce him at the very beginning as being, a cop, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's a part at kind of the end of the trailer where they tell Sonic to like hide in this bag, as they're going into this building, and he uses this, excuse of like, oh, it's just a child in the bag. Right.
Oh, and they ask, is it their child?
Yeah, he goes, don't worry, it's
child.
not my child,
yeah.
right? And somebody had brought up something like, okay, so this guy's a cop, and that's what he chose to be this, like, undercover, like his excuse for this undercover mission when he was asked was, oh, I have a child in a duffel bag. It
was probably just being cute. I mean, the whole thing, Dr. Robotnik, was pretty outrageous, too.
And I get the whole point.
It's supposed to be very cutesy.
I get that the whole point of the movie is to be cutesy, but I mean, you're still, when you're making a movie like Sonic the Hedgehog, you're also appeasing to... You're making that more so for the fans that grew up with Sonic, and the people who grew up with Sonic are older. But... another thing too was there was that little scene they put at the end where like he had all these missiles coming and rockets coming toward him, and then he was able to go so fast where he stopped time, and did whatever, destroyed all of them.
Right.
Well, somebody had brought up, the cop walked into a room earlier in the trailer and stabbed him with a tranquilizer, shot him with a tranquilizer, and Sonic wasn't able to get away from that one.
But he can escape a missile though.
But he can escape like 50 missiles coming at him at rocket speed.
Maybe he was prepared for the missiles.
I guess. I mean, if we're gonna make excuses for him, I guess
it's a fucking Sonic the Hedgehog movie.
I know.
You're supposed to go and just go, oh, that's cute. That looks cool. Check that out.
Well, nobody else is, so why should we be any different?
Right. But I mean, kudos for them trying to make a live action Sonic. That's not super easy.
Yeah. The director came out though and said that like, I get that you're complaining about this, so we're gonna like do a design change. So
right on. There
they're gonna completely go and like redesign it for him.
Problem solved right there. Boom.
Yeah.
Hopefully, unless he makes it worse.
Yeah. Ugh. I feel like we're starting to see more of these kind of movies come out now where people are taking these like popular cartoons or video games. Now they're trying to make these live action movies of it. We're seeing that with Detective Pikachu. We're seeing that with like Sonic the Hedgehog now. So I'm really curious about what games they're going to try to do next.
I want to see them try to do Mario again. Because they did Mario in like the 80s? Or was it the early 90s maybe?
It was the 90s, yeah.
They made a Mario movie, a Super Mario Brothers movie.
I wonder...
And it was I grew up watching it thinking it was a great movie.
It definitely
but it is regarded as
like,
not a great movie.
Well, it's one of those movies now where... I think it's kind of the same thing that maybe the Sonic the Hedgehog movie will turn out to be, right? You have the people who grew up playing the Sonic games who are going to go and hating it because they have the love of the Sonic games and have an understanding of the Sonic games.
Right.
But you may have younger people who grow up with the movie, growing up watching the movie, not understanding the inconsistencies that we see.
Yeah.
And it'll
bring a whole new breed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Because with the Mario movie back in the 90s, that definitely has kind of a cult following now amongst us millennials where it's so bad it's
that
good.
Movie was badass.
Yeah.
I think both of those actors, the ones who played Mario and Luigi.
Yeah, they were great for that role.
Well, I think they're both have gone down in history saying that it was like the worst role they ever took in their careers. Or like the worst thing that ever happened to their career.
Which is funny because the movie didn't kill their career. It's one of those strange, because George Clooney says the same thing about when he played Batman and Batman and Robin. He goes and says like, I totally regret doing that movie.
Well, not that it killed their career, I guess, but just that it was the worst role they ever took.
Yeah.
Exactly. I loved it. I thought they nailed it. It was a great movie.
I'd like to see them try to do another live action Mario, but I don't know exactly how you'd, even as from a filmmaking standpoint, I don't know how you would go about doing that. But I don't know how you would go about doing Sonic either.
Yeah, if they can do Sonic, they can do Mario.
Yeah.
Mario has a much richer story than Sonic.
You know what I would love to see a live action
I think
of?
He says arbitrarily. That's true.
You know what I would love to see a live action movie of that I think they could really make badass, and that is like a Zelda.
Oh yeah, that'd be fucking
live
awesome,
action
dude.
Movie.
That'd be awesome.
Oh.
That would have so much weight on its shoulders, though.
Oh, big
like
time.
if they made the Ocarina of Time, but made it a movie.
That's what I've wondered. I'm curious because I feel like we're gonna see that in the next 10 years. I think we will see.
Oh, they better do a good job.
Well, and that's what I mean. So first of all, I wonder, would they make it a separate story, or would they make it like? Would they take one of the games like Ocarina of Time and say, we're going to make this particular game into a live action?
Well, I personally, being someone who grew up playing Zelda since the Ocarina of Time, and even before that, I would like to see them remake one of the stories that was already done.
Yeah.
Not a brand new Zelda story. Yeah. But I would imagine that they would probably make a new Zelda story.
That's what I think the smartest, because I feel like if you did something like if you made a live action of like Ocarina of Time, or really any of the Zelda games, I feel like that's not something you can cover in like a movie, you know. So if you did Ocarina of Time, you'd have to like span it out into.
You just have to send them to a couple different temples. Give them a bow, give them a slingshot, have some music. It wouldn't be that tough.
But with all the temples and little side stories and side quests and Ocarina of Time, you think they could span that down into 2.5 to 3 hours?
It would just be the main storyline quest. It would just be the Gandalf thing.
Gotcha.
Like him go. So he would, yeah, it would just be that. You would see like the Gorons, and you would see the fish people. You know, it would basically just walk us through each of the characters, what they look like, have a loose story involved. And that, I mean, what else can you do in 2 hours?
True.
Right.
Would you rather see Link talk or have him do it without him talking?
Ooh.
Yeah. Do you think they could do it without him talking and have it still be good?
Well, shit. I didn't even think about that.
That's one thing I've always thought of if they did a live action Zelda
Link doesn't
movie.
talk.
Link doesn't talk.
Link never talks.
It's always implied that he's talking, but you never actually hear him speak.
I don't even think that any words come up that are his word. I don't think he ever talks.
No. There's never like a bubble or anything
dialect
that comes
for him
up. But
ever.
there's always just the responses of like I've noticed that in like what was the newest one, Breath of the Wild, right? Where like he'll be going up interacting with the characters, and the characters will say something like "No need to be rude" or like sassy.
Right,
but you actually never hear Link say something.
Okay, I get what you're saying. Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm always curious of like, and then there is a manga, like a Japanese comic book they've made of some of the Zelda stories. And Link does talk in those, he has a little talk bubble and everything.
I don't think I'd like to see him talk.
I don't either.
I think what they could do is give him the fairy and have some of his dialogue come through the fairy. You know what I mean?
Right.
And kind of do it that way.
Yeah.
And I guess just computer animate the fairy, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the way I've thought about doing it, is if you give them like, what were some of the fairy names, like Navi or Tattle?
Yeah.
If you
Tattle or something like that.
If you give them one of those fairies and you make them basically the driving piece of dialogue in the entire thing,
which is pretty much what it was in the game, right?
Yeah.
She walked you through. She told you where all the things were.
But I feel like to really make that work also, you have to have characters around him at all times that are completely driving the story and not him. You know what I mean? Like the whole reason the story will have to be driven forward is because of his interactions with everybody else.
Well, you could if you had someone casted who was really good at being the bad guy, at being Gandalf, and just like
Ganondorf.
Yeah, why do I keep calling him Gandalf? Who's Gandalf? Gandalf's from something.
Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings. Ha. Ganondorf. Okay, so if you made him talk a lot and kind of showcased him more, then you could have the bad guy drive the story and just have the hero like react to it.
Well, and that's what I've thought, because if you had it being more of like let's say you had a story that started with like Ganondorf basically like kicking down the door of Hyrule Castle, right? And then, like,
he steals the princess.
And steals the princess, right? So if you made this kind of giant interaction between Zelda and Ganondorf, and you almost make the whole thing with Link saving her almost like a side story to everything. Like he just almost like a character that just happens to be there every time shit hits the fan, and just happens to be an asset.
I wouldn't like that. Time. I want him to be the main character.
Yeah, see, that's where I think it'd get difficult, not giving him dialogue.
I mean, I get what you're saying, but it would just have to be cleverly done. It would have to be something that when you watched it, you go, "Oh, that's clever." You know what I mean? Like, I can't think of it. That's why I'm not making it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't either.
I trust that someone out there has a vision that they're like, we could do it this way.
Yes.
And it'll work.
And I feel like it will. The Zelda movies are cool, or Zelda movies. The Zelda games are cool too if they were to make them into movies, because every Zelda game is a different story, right? So I feel like
yes, yeah, no, they don't. Yeah, they don't flow like one after another.
Right,
after another.
You know, people have made their own connections afterwards, but story wise, one doesn't take.
They're
place
all their
after
own
the other.
stories.
Yeah. So what's cool if you were to make those into movies, especially if like the first one that they make did well. Oh, that's beautiful. Sorry, Matthew just turned this like putty into this nice little swirling pattern. But anyways, if you had like a first movie that did well, then you could continue on with it and make other movies with different actors, you know, playing the roles of Link and Zelda and stuff, but they're all just different stories with different styles of filmmaking, much like how the games are.
You could do that. That personally annoys me. We've talked about that before on the podcast. I personally like to just see one big long story. And if anything, start with one of the old games. Probably Ocarina of Time, because that's what made Zelda blow up.
Yeah.
I mean, you could argue if it's the most popular or not, but I bet you it's the best selling.
It's definitely
all of them.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So maybe start with that, and then after that you have the freedom to kind of keep telling the story to like, here's what you never knew growing up, you know, let us fill in some pieces for you now, and then turn it into like fucking Star Wars or whatever, where it's who knows how far it goes. Make it 8 episodes long, I don't care.
Right.
But I would rather see that than see them do, you know, Breath of the Wild, and then the Ocarina of Time, and then Wind Waker, and that.
I would almost want to see.
Although that would be cool too, I guess.
Well, I feel like you could do that, like doing it in the way you're talking, where you make it a whole like long form story, you know, with the same
at least like a
actors
trilogy
and stuff. Yeah, and I feel like you would be able to do that, and instead of following like all of the stories, because if you did this, I would cast somebody younger to play, you know, the kid Link that we know, you know, and love in a lot of the games. And
because in that game he is Kid Link for part of it, and then Adult Link.
And then you follow him kind of through these stories, and then, you know, after however many movies, you know, I mean, there's 9 Star Wars movies. There's no reason there can't be 9 Zelda movies.
Oh, for sure.
You know, so after you go through all of this, you have the same actor, you see how he grows up, and instead of just focusing on like Ocarina of Time or something, you have a different kind of like unique long form story, but then through the movies he visits and like meets characters kind of from the different games with like the similar situations, but just like set up differently. Does that make sense?
Yes, and it sounds epic as fuck. It sounds actually really amazing when you put it that way. However, I'm getting a lot of scenes of like The Gladiator. Remember that movie?
Yes.
How that was shot? Like, forget the story about it. That doesn't matter. But remember how it was shot, like when he's in the wagon, he's beat up, and he's like on the dirt road, and how it really made you feel like it was there. It was very real. They went to a deserty place. It wasn't like computer animated, you know?
Right.
I would want to see it done like that if they were going to make it this epic, like 9 movie long, here's a boy growing to be a hero. And then the last few movies, maybe even if they put the last few movies out first, like here he is as an adult kicking ass to get us into it. And then do like Star Wars. Just rip off Star Wars. Fuck it. You know, they own it anyway. No, they don't. That's Nintendo. All right, so no. They don't own Star Wars. But just rip it off. Whatever. I would just like to see it be very realistically done with like all human actors actually in
practical effects.
Like when we meet the Gorons, I understand that the Gorons are going to be computer animated.
Right.
I get that. But go to a mountain, go to a real volcano.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And shoot it there. When you meet the Zora, I get that they're going to be computer animated. But go to a real badass river. Go to the Nile or something. You know what I mean?
I would even argue that even with like characters like the Gorons or Zoras, I feel like you wouldn't even have to go computer animated. I mean, when you when you think about the Zoras, you know, you really just need to cast a bunch of tall, skinny people.
Yeah, make them look like fish.
Put prosthetics on them. Exactly. And Goron just the opposite.
I wouldn't be upset though if they did it that way.
Oh no,
you know what
and
I mean? If they computer animated the ghouls and the monsters and shit, I would be okay with that.
Oh yeah, I would too. I mean, when you see the live action stuff now,
he has to be a real guy.
He has to be a real guy. And I've seen a lot of little short film live action stuff where they've
What if instead of a fairy following him around, if they take this story like you're talking about and it's a spin-off, so it's none of the stories we've heard before, but all the same characters, and we're gonna delve into it for 9 movies. What if he had like a little girl companion or a sister or something that is a human that is little and innocent and cutesy?
And what if just like the game, cool. And you know how like in the games, like at least in a couple of them, like there's a different fairy following him around?
Yeah.
So what if in every movie there's a different companion? He just finds himself with a different companion. It's a single story that follows on a larger story.
I would just like it to be like, not to be sexist, but a girly cutesy companion, because they're very high pitched fairies usually who are cutesy and innocent, but also kind of not promiscuous, but kind of naughty, like to cause mischievous is the word for it.
Yeah, I could see that.
So I would think like a little sister would be the perfect thing.
Yeah, I think finding some companion like that for each one would actually be very clever. And then when you do kind of a long form story like that, like one thing I think of is, you know how I was saying like you capture the essence and different bits of the storyline from different games?
Yeah.
So like what if you made the main long form storyline Ocarina of Time, right?
Okay.
But so how Ocarina of Time started with basically, in so many words, his conception when he lived in the village, and he came from the
it started in the village, and he goes into the
like
tree, and it's the passing of the tree,
and then he goes and does the stuff. So then,
that could be a whole movie right there.
Exactly. And then at some point too, in the game, halfway through the game, he goes and visits the Temple of Time, and he becomes an adult, right? And he's able to do this kind of back and forth stuff. Well, you can have now a few movies of him a kid before he even gets to that point.
Oh, for sure.
So the whole long forth theme is Ocarina of Time, but then let's say after the first movie, he has to go, just how you had, remember in Ocarina of Time, you had to find like the 3 jewels or whatnot. So, and you had to go to 3 different temples to find them, right?
There's a red one, there's a blue one, and there's a green one.
So let's say the first movie, he goes to the temple to get the blue one, right? And then
that would be the water temple.
The water temple, there you go. So then the second one, let's say he has to go get the green one, right?
That's the forest temple.
So he goes to the forest temple, but on his way in the forest temple, he finds himself in the forest, and somebody wearing the Majora's Mask.
Oh, the kid, the Majora's Mask kid. Oh, that would be cool.
So then that movie becomes, well, I can't go and get to the forest temple until I take care of this Majora problem.
But so I wouldn't want them to then go through the story of the moon and all that stuff. That would be way too long. But if they made a throwback to it, like if they just introduced the Skull Kid for a minute, or for maybe a movie or whatever, and had him be like an antagonist in it, I would think that's really cool.
And that's what I would say. So then
But I don't want to see the whole story. Like keep it to
and that's what I mean.
Ocarina of
Time. So you just take the essence of these different things. So then the second movie is about his adventures in Clock Town, and now he has to go and do these different things to stop the Majora's Mask. And then the third movie is back on his journey to go to the Forest Temple again. Maybe the third movie is about the Forest Temple. But then he meets people in there and like deals with situations from maybe Breath of the Wild, and like so you kind of capture essences and different things from different games, but it's all one large story, which is Ocarina of Time.
Dude, and there's enough fan fiction that links the games together that you could totally do that.
Yes.
Because there's links to after you're in the forest after the Majora's Mask of that leading into Wind Waker.
Yeah.
Because in the beginning of Wind Waker, there's a foresty thing going on. And you have to kind of get out of that. It's like a dreamy, foresty kind of scene.
Yeah.
In the beginning. Do you remember? Remember that?
Yeah, yes. Absolutely.
So, yeah, you would be able to tie them together into a series of movies.
And let's say one of the movies, you just add, what was the temple to get the red stone? That was
that would be the fire temple.
The fire temple. So then let's say in order to get to the fire temple, you just add something in there where maybe the fire temple's across this ocean. So he has to go on this boat, and deal with things from there. So you tie them all together. But
it's its own unique story.
Yes.
I think that if it was done right, that could be one of the best movies ever.
I think so as well.
Like go down for years being watched and like remembered, and then you would just have amazing.
But then you would just have to find a way, if you were to make this giant, multiple movie saga, you would just have to find a way to make it enticing and interesting to listen to or watch without Link talking. So you'd have to really make sure those companions in each of the games are really...
Dude, Link can't talk. That would piss people off.
I agree with you.
That would ruin the whole thing. You can't be authentic to Zelda and have Link talk.
I agree.
It doesn't work. So we got to figure something else out.
Yeah, you would have to almost make it just nonstop. You know who I think could do that very well? Quentin Tarantino.
I was just thinking Quentin Tarantino.
I feel like he'd be, because everybody would be having enough interesting dialogue and things going on around where you wouldn't even care if Link's talking.
Has there ever been a movie where the hero doesn't talk, but everyone else does?
Not that I feel like
even
there has
Daredevil
to be one
talks.
out there. Yeah.
He can't see, but he talks.
Right. I mean, I feel like there's
got to be something.
Well, there's been movies where nobody's talked.
Yeah, I know, and I'm thinking of that one too.
Yeah,
and,
but no, I don't think that counts.
I mean, Silent Place.
Maybe another director duo that could do it is the Coen brothers. They're the ones who did like The Big Lebowski, and they did the True Grit remake, and
yeah, they could rock it.
Well, one thing they're famous for as filmmakers is they're famous for making films where the main character doesn't drive the story. Everything that's happening around them drives the story.
Oh, that would be perfect.
So,
for that,
like,
then.
if you remember The Big Lebowski, what was his whole thing? He just wanted somebody to I think it was like his rug. He wanted somebody to replace his rug.
Right.
But he kept getting himself in these situations because of everything that was happening around him. People thought he was involved in shit that he wasn't. And he just kept saying, I just want my fucking rug replaced.
So something like that would work because usually Zelda starts with just Link being woken up, saying, "Hey, you need to save the world.
Something, yeah.
Go save the world."
Oh, and you know what? They actually did make. It was a short film, but this short film, the main character did not speak at all, and it was like a 10, 15-minute short film, and it was with the main character was Steve Buscemi, you know who he is, right?
I think I know who he is.
Steve Buscemi. Let me see if I can find a picture of him.
Crazy one?
He's been crazy. He's in a lot of Adam Sandler movies. But
show him to me. I'm pretty sure I know who he is.
I feel like you do also. You'll have to recognize him. He was in Spy Kids 2. That's one a lot of younger people recognize him from. This guy.
Let's Oh, yeah, I love that dude. He's in a ton of Adam Sandler movies.
Yes. So the Coen brothers made this like 10, 15 minutes short where it was just him sitting in like a subway in France. And he was looking across the tracks, and he saw these this couple like making out, and he was just like staring at them, right? And then the guy of the couple like noticed him and was like yelling at him, and he was acting like he wasn't looking. Meanwhile, there was a little side story of this like rowdy kid and his mother sitting next to him that he was having issues with. But the entire time, you were enticed in watching him, figuring out what's going to happen. But his character didn't speak at all, didn't utter a sound or a word. So maybe they would be the best ones to get for that.
Dude, so you know how like India, their film industry is called Bollywood?
Yeah.
And we have Hollywood here in America. Does France have one that's called something?
I don't think so.
Because the French people, or from the country, whatever, however you would say that, French films are fucking awesome. And they're the ones I've seen.
Some of the best filmmakers.
They are deep. The story is deep. I don't want to be too like general because I haven't seen every single French movie, obviously.
No,
but the
pretty
ones
on
I've
point,
seen,
though.
dude, are they're subtitles, but you're the most into them.
Yes.
They are just story driven.
The French and the French make some. I've seen a lot of French films, and they make some really cool fucking films. One of my
They're always a little bit off the wall, like make you think a
they're
little.
artsy, definitely. They're
Definitely
always
artsy.
fartsy movies.
Yes.
They're definitely films for filmmakers, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But they one of my favorite French directors, probably my most favorite French director, is this gentleman named Lars von Trier, and he's very well known in the film industry. But he makes very off the wall and controversial films. But they're like, you watch them and they're super just like they're definitely like make you think films.
Yes,
and
I understand what you mean.
And he's somebody who definitely like delves into like the
They're just
emotions
creative,
of the
like the way that the Twilight Zone, when you watch an episode of it, no single thing in a Twilight Zone episode is out of this world. But the way that they put it all together, you go, oh, fuck, I never really exactly thought of that before. That's what a French film is for me.
Yes.
Is nothing alone is anything different than any other film. But the way they put it together and the twist they'll make the characters go through.
Yes.
They don't rely on jumps. They don't rely on gore the way that a lot of other movies do. I don't know. I don't want to prop them up too much because, like I said, I've only seen a handful.
Well,
but I've really enjoyed the French movies that I've seen, dude.
And I mean, I would urge anybody out there to, take a gander at some
Check
of them.
them out.
I
literally don't even have one that I could offer you a name of.
Oh, I can
don't know.
offer you.
I've
a
only
couple.
seen them in passing.
There's one that was popular last year that I believe is still on Netflix that I watched and enjoyed, and it was called Raw. And it was about this French girl, and it's been a while since I've seen it, so I'll try to summarize it best I can. But it's about this girl going to school, and I can't remember how it happens, but she basically finds out that she has this, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Not an appetite for human flesh.
Oh,
Right.
see? That kind of stuff.
Well, and then like through the film, she's kind of going through the like trying to fight this compulsion that she has. And then she finds out that her sister also has this compulsion. Her sister's basically like, okay, here's how you deal with it. Here's how you like live with this compulsion that you have. And like
wow.
it's like it was a very interesting film. And so that one's on Netflix. A 2-part movie on Netflix by Lars von Trier that's on there is called it's the Nymphomaniac movie, and it's 2 parts.
I've always seen that and I've never watched it.
It is
I've scrolled by that probably 100 times.
It is a fucking intense movie, but it is fantastic.
Really?
Well, even just the way that it opens up. The best movies have good contrast in them between characters.
Right.
So it opens up with this woman, the nymphomaniac, basically like lying down.
That means someone who's addicted to sex.
Oh,
by
yeah,
the way,
for those who
just
don't
in
know.
case anyone's illiterate.
So it starts off with this woman, the nymphomaniac, like laying in an alleyway, like looking beat up, and a gentleman comes to her aid and says, like, brings her into his house and, takes care of her and basically, gets her back into health.
Okay.
But they start talking and everything, and you have this and the whole thing is like you have this
bet they do more than
nymphomaniac.
talk.
Well, they don't. And here's the funny thing. So you have this nymphomaniac who's talking to somebody who's there's a word for it, but I can't remember, but somebody who doesn't like desire sex at all. Like they just don't care about it. They
Probably
don't,
something with
it's called like asexual
abstinent
or something. There are people out there who consider themselves asexual where they just don't have any desire for sex at all. So she finds herself with this gentleman now that she's like telling her story to, and this guy's explaining to her, she's explaining why sex means so much to her, and he's explaining why sex doesn't mean anything to him.
How interesting.
So through that, she starts to tell his story, and something that was super interesting about it, something that it hits you with like towards the end. It doesn't ruin anything in the film, but obviously the story is about, her being promiscuous and like going and finding random men to have sex with and
Right.
And I remember the guy that she's talking to said something really profound that made me think after watching this whole story. and he starts to summarize the story of like, you know, she used to go into these trains and find random men, married or not, and have competitions of how many they could sleep with, her or her friend, and like how, you know, she like found random people on the street to just fuck because she wanted to and stuff like that. But going through all these things, and the guy's summarizing this, and he goes, I find it funny how if you told that story to people and you were a man, they wouldn't look at it as being weird at all.
Oh yeah, that's true.
You know, so it's like, it was just one of those, like, there's a lot of moments like that in that 2-part film. That's really interesting.
I can't believe I have passed that up so many times.
Yeah, trust me, I did too. It wasn't until Vince actually told me about it and was like, Adam, you need to watch this movie. But, and then not to rant on about French films for too long, but another one out there by the same director, if you guys want something that's a little less raunchy, is a movie called Melancholia, which is it's literally just about an exoplanet that's going to hit the Earth and how a family...
my Lord, I have dreams about that.
I know you do.
No.
But it's just...
have I ever told the viewers about those?
I feel like you've mentioned it.
We've talked about it on
gone into like detail.
So I have... It's kind of hard for me to talk about. I'm sorry. Give me a second here. So I have very detailed dreams about objects, planets, stars, all kinds of shit. They're different every time. But extraterrestrial bodies, big ones, slowly but surely running into the Earth. Like, just to the point, like, you see it get bigger and bigger and bigger in the sky from a little dot until it's just giant. It takes up the whole sky, and then things get really, really hot, and then it just fucking, the dream's over because it collides, right?
Right.
But, yeah, I dream about that often.
Not a movie for you, then.
No, it's horrible.
That's literally
I don't even know where my brain got it from.
I don't either. That's
I have
crazy.
no idea. It's got to mean something.
The first thing I always think of when you first told me about those dreams was because the first time I ever saw that kind of thing in a movie was there was a movie called The Time Machine that they did a remake of in like the early 2000s. And at one point is this guy from like, you know, he's from like America, the 1800s, you know, and as he's like in this time machine going forward, he reaches a point in the future where like he comes out and there's these like soldiers trying to like evacuate everybody, and he looks up and the moon's like slowly just coming into the Earth.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, I mean, the first place I probably saw it ever was Majora's Mask.
Oh yeah.
Because that game's all about the moon slowly hitting the Earth.
Yeah.
So, but I didn't start dreaming about it until I was a young adult.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's traumatizing, bro. It's hard.
Oh man.
Because I mean, whatever. This isn't a dream podcast. It's just so real. It's just so real. It's like, fuck.
It's so funny what's like considered. You said this is a dream podcast, but I feel like it's going to become that now.
All right, let's do it.
But it's funny to me the things that are nightmares to people and how like there are some nightmares to some people and some not to other ones. Because like me, for example, I've had dreams before where I'm being like chased by some like otherworldly creature or some monster or whatnot. I've had those dreams before, but I never like wake up in like a sweat or anything or like look at the dream as a nightmare. I don't interpret it as a nightmare. I just kind of wake up and I'm like, oh, well, you know, that was quite the adventure I just had, you know, in my dream kind of thing. But dreams I do have that fucking make me wake up like that. Like there's a recurring nightmare that I get, and I'm always in a car and I'm always with my brother and I'm driving and I'm on this road that looks like a Hot Wheels track, like an orange Hot Wheels track, right? And it's always
so there's
orange.
a loop-de-loop in it, obviously.
And there's a lot of loopy-loops.
Oh
in
boy.
it. So, and I always find myself like driving on a straight road. I'm not really rooted to the ground. It feels like we're way up, like miles and miles and miles and miles and miles.
So you
up
have that
above
like
the ground.
that like falling feeling going on.
Not even the falling feeling, at least not yet. I'm on just this straight path, and then coming up, you can see the road starts to go up at basically a 90-degree angle.
Oh my goodness.
And there's like loops and turns, right? Like so much and so high to where like the clouds are like, going in and out of this
that's kind of badass.
highway,
Okay.
right?
All right.
It sounds badass, and as I'm driving up to it, there's obviously other cars you see going around these loops and upside down and stuff like that.
Obviously.
But I always reach to it and I'm like, I'm not going to, like, I don't know how these people are driving this because I'm not going to be able to do it.
Oh, shit.
So I always get to the point where like I'm going up at like this 90-degree angle and I'm like really fucking trying to get my car to fucking do it, and I'm pushing on the gas, but I'm not able to fucking get it to reach the kind of speed it needs to go. So then I either start falling off of the track or I start falling backwards down the track. And every time right before that happens, like I wake up, but I always, it's my most anxiety ridden dream. And
What?
I fucking
How crazy.
hate it. Yeah. It's weird. Like,
See, nothing about that sounds terrifying, but
See?
I completely believe you that it hits a chord
well,
with you.
and that's what I mean. So it's just so funny, these things that other people consider nightmare. Because like the dream that you're talking about was something like hitting. I've had those dreams before, and I'm always the one who will wake up and I'm like, cool.
Not me.
Obviously.
Not me. I'll be like, holy fuck, that was intense.
Yeah, dude. Dreams are fucking crazy. But French films, man, check those out.
French films.
Other crazy filmmakers out there are the Spanish, like from
Really?
Spain. They make some
I don't know if I've ever seen a Spanish film.
You have. You saw The Revenant, right? That was a Spanish film.
Oh, really?
The Revenant?
They didn't
yeah.
speak Spanish in it, though.
No, but it was like made by a like iconic like Spanish director in the sense of like he embraces those kind of like filmmaking techniques that you see a lot in like Spanish films. Like one film that he did, and I think I've talked about on the podcast before.
I'm trying to think if I like The Reverend or not.
Yeah, Revenant was an interesting one. There's another one is like the guy who did, his name's Alfonso Cuarón. He did like Gravity, the Sandy B.
Sandy B in
movie.
space.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know Gravity.
Yeah, so there's...
It was ridiculous.
It was ridiculous. But like that's kind of like what you get with Spanish films though. There's always this weird kind of like fantasy-esque... I can't speak for The Reverend because I haven't seen it, but I know like the film that particular director did before was Birdman, that actually won Best Picture when it came out, and there was definitely some like fantasy-esque stuff in that movie when it was rooted in like realism.
Okay, so yeah, I would say that there's with The Reverend, whatever, however you say
One
it.
of those.
Reverend.
Maybe.
Reverend.
I think
With that movie, it was definitely realistic. Definitely, like it was set in realism, but a lot of fantastic things happened.
Like what?
Not fantastic, like great, but like fantastic, like you probably wouldn't have walked away from that in real life, but you did in the movie.
Right.
Like, I mean, there's one big one that involves a horse getting fucked up really bad. And him killing it, and he's in the snow, obviously.
Right.
So he cuts his horse open and he sleeps in it. Stuff like that. Like, realistic, you could do that, but who the fuck does that?
Right.
You know what I mean?
I feel ya.
Come on.
Yeah.
So, like, just things like that. But definitely, like, the whole movie is just about... I don't really know what the fucking movie is about. Well, no, I know what it's about. It's about him avenging his quote-unquote son that gets killed.
Gotcha.
Is basically what it is. But he's a trapper. He's a trapper in the New World, so in America. But before it was America, like way back. I would say even before the Pilgrim times, like when it was just barely being colonized. He was a trapper.
Oh, gotcha.
And the Native Americans attack him and the other trappers when they're doing their thing. And through the course of that, he gets betrayed by one of his own people, and they kill his son, young man friend thing. And then he gets pissed about that, but he's fucked up because he keeps getting fucked up over and over in the movie. Like he never has a moment. Leo never has a moment where he's at 100% and he can just fight or like do something. Like he's constantly beat up or fucked up or like limping away from a situation.
Right.
Constantly. So just that.
There was
Not his
best.
not
role,
my
but
favorite film of his.
I feel
And I love Leo.
Well, in terms of like the Spanish movies, and I'm much more familiar with French movies than I am Spanish. So I can't give a lot of examples, but one I can give is like Birdman. And one of the things that this
I think of the basketball player.
director, I know you do, but one thing that this director does in that movie is it follows this actor who's basically kind of sort of a has-been, but just has like an ego through the roof, right?
Okay.
And it's him dealing with that ego and everybody around him dealing with that ego. So in the film, there are points where like I think the film opens up on him where the camera like pans into the room and you see him like meditating, but he's like floating in the air, right?
Okay.
But the whole, at least the way I interpret it, because nobody else sees this, nobody else like, you know, it's never mentioned that like, oh, he's sidekick or anything through it, right?
Okay.
So it's almost like it's this physical manifestation that the director chose to represent how high this guy thinks of himself.
That's what I would think also,
You know,
yes.
so and there's a lot of that throughout the movie.
That's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, it's a very interesting way to like tell a story, you know.
I like that.
But you see that a lot in Spanish films. They'll take that kind of fantasism and put that kind of stuff in there. So Gravity, they did that when George Clooney came back, you know, as like this entity, you know, came back in Sandy B's dreams and was like, oh, you could just turn it off or you can go on.
That's the one where they cut the fucking space suits at the hands so that they could use it as jets and jet back to each other because they were floating off. Is that that one?
I think you're thinking of The Martian with Matt Damon. That's how Matt Damon got back to the ship.
Oh, that is. Oh, he cuts the.
Yeah, he
fucking
was like,
hand
I'm
thing.
gonna Iron Man it. Remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
I hated that part. Fucking dumbass shit. That was the stupidest fucking bullshit I ever saw.
That definitely did not happen in Gravity.
Okay, all right then. Good.
But
then
there
Gravity's solid.
Yeah,
Right.
Gravity is solid, but there was another Spanish movie that Justin and I watched that I think it was called Skins.
Oh boy, that doesn't sound great.
Oh my gosh, it was
That sounds
so,
like cannibals.
It was so weird, Matthew. So
Are we talking about some Hannibal Lecter shit?
no.
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 Oh.
Weirder.
Oh, well,
Weirder.
how could you fucking be weirder than Hannibal Lecter?
So the entire movie follows these. It's basically a movie about people with physical defects trying to find love.
Oh, that
about.
sounds really
But, like,
uncomfortable.
But the defects that people have, that some of the people have in there, are just like super weird. So there's this.
Oh, no.
So like one of the characters is this girl that this like older woman like prostitutes out, like whores out to people, but she has no eyes. But so, and one of her security things this girl with no eyes is she has like these two like jewels that she'll like put on, like there's no sockets or anything. It's literally just like clear.
Okay.
And she'll put these two jewels where her eyes are supposed to be. And it's like
It's
a
like
security
Silent
thing
Hill
for her.
Just a flesh head.
Yeah, just a flesh head. And then like there's another girl who has, dead serious, she has a butthole where her mouth is and a mouth where her butthole should be.
She's a butt face.
She's a butt face, literally.
Oh, I'm sure that's a real thing that's happened before. I'm sorry.
I don't think
I had
so.
I had a friend whose brother was born without a butthole.
I've heard of those before. I've also heard
Had a colon, had all the
of-
other things it needed, just no cheeks and no butthole. They had to give him a butthole.
So I've heard of those instances. I've also heard of people that didn't have like the cheeks, didn't have like an actual butt, but they did have the hole.
Oh,
And they had, yeah, I've read a couple stories like that. I don't think anybody's had a butthole on their face though.
that would be a pretty freak mess up of anatomy.
Yes, 100%. But those were the kind of like physical defects people had in it, and then it was and the movie was just that. It was about all of them finding love, but it was just told in a very weird way.
It's funny you bring that up because I actually saw a real documentary about real life people who actually exist that this happened to.
Yeah.
And it was, they were both normal. Well, they were both biologically average when they were born, right? So they had everything in the normal place of what everyone else has. Everything worked normally, okay? So one dude grew up and he became, he worked on like telephone wires,
Okay.
like the power lines, okay?
Yeah.
And he got shocked to shit one day and it shocked his face off, literally. Like it melted his face off.
That's horrible.
Okay, but he lived.
Right.
And they fixed him, and he was healed, but his face was literally melted. It was fucked up. Okay. So obviously he didn't look like most other people. So dating was kind of an issue for him, right? But he could still talk.
Right.
Like they gave him a mouth again, and he could talk, and he sounded legit. Like his voice wasn't fucked up from this.
Right.
So the documentary was about how he ended up finding love with a blind chick.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah. So she was really pretty, but she was blind. So she didn't give a shit that he was that his face was melted. But he still sounded great, like Rico Suave. His voice was still nice. So she got the pleasure of a beautiful, or well, not like a very strong masculine man voice.
Right.
And his hands and everything were the same. So when, he touched her and stuff, it felt like she was with a regular guy. She didn't give a shit that his face was melted.
Oh, how
and
cute.
he didn't give a shit that she was blind because he felt more secure. And she was
Right.
still super beautiful. Like it just so happened that she was a really pretty girl who got blind.
Oh, well, good for that.
So it worked out perfect for
Yeah.
him. So there really is, guys, someone out there who it could work with. No matter what your situation is.
Absolutely.
There's someone in a similar situation.
Well, and it's funny you actually say that because that ended up kind of being the lesson to the end of this movie because you had all these people with defects who were trying to find love and they all spoiler alert, they all find love, but it's like these, like, you would never think it works, but it does.
It just works
because
perfect.
of what it is with each other. So
Interesting.
So like the girl with the butthole mouth, like there's one normal guy they follow through this entire thing, no physical defects or anything, but he happens to have a kink where he's very attracted to people with physical defects.
Oh, wow.
So then she ends up finding the way her story wraps up is she ends up meeting this guy and finding love with him because he just
it works
happens to
out
be
for
this
him.
defect. And the same thing with the girl with the jewels on the eyes and some of the other ones they follow. But very interesting film. And I feel like with the Spanish movies that I have seen, that film there is kind of the epitome of what you get with like Spanish filmmaking, where you get that like that fanaticism rooted in realism.
With like a moral behind it.
Yeah, and there always is a moral, and that's what's cool about it, but it's just told in a very obnoxious, out of this world way. And I feel like the Spanish filmmakers are able to kind of pull that back a little bit, are the ones you end up seeing, with films like The Reverend or Birdman or any of the, Gravity, Children of Men, any of these other kind of more Spanish-esque films that come out. But it's really interesting. And that it's cool looking at the different cultures and seeing the kind of movies they produce, because you see that with, like, you brought up Bollywood at the very beginning. And I've seen a few Bollywood movies.
They're very musical.
They're always
very dancey musical.
Which is so funny
Flashy.
because it doesn't matter if it's an action movie, a drama, a comedy.
It doesn't matter.
Always musical numbers in it.
Yes.
Always.
Well, I think that's like literally part of the culture of it. I have no idea where it stems from or where it came from or anything about it, but I do know that there's always singing and dancing in every one of them.
They're good though.
They're very entertaining. Beautiful costumes and scenery. Oh, gorgeous. And the ones that I've seen, I'm sure there's ones about poor people too, but
right.
Yeah.
Well, some of the best films that I've seen just come out of the world at all are Chinese films, dude.
Really?
Chinese. Oh yeah, they have the #1 film market in the world.
I'm pretty sure that the Chinese invented the camera.
No, it was the French.
Pretty sure that the Chinese invented the lens.
They might have invented the lens. They did not invent the camera, though.
Something like that.
Because it was the Luminaire brothers who invented that. Or invented film in general, I should say. But they may have invented the lens, for sure.
I think it was something like that. They used it to look at the stars. It used to be in a box. You would walk into this like room, and you could look through this thing. And say,
To look at the stars?
I think so. I remember watching something about this. It was either
That
the
might be
camera
true.
or the lens that came from China.
I'm pretty...
Like way back, way earlier than you would think, bro.
Because I can tell you how the camera was invented. So the video camera was invented, and
I mean, like picture camera. Does that make a difference?
oh yes, that does make a difference.
Okay.
I thought you were talking about like film camera.
No,
like
picture camera.
I
Okay, so in
could
that
believe
case,
that, yeah.
I believe that I think the Chinese created the picture camera, and it
Okay.
was like the size of a room when they first did it.
That makes
You had to
sense.
like you had to open a door and walk into it.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
Because I know the old like fashion like photographs that you see and everything now, it literally required you, just as you said, to walk into a room. And then like the reason why one of the little fun facts about old pictures, the reason why you never see anybody smiling in them is because you had to sit there for a while to be able to capture all the
interesting.
image. So when they went in there and sat, it can get tiresome having to like hold a smile for 5-10 minutes. Whereas like if you're just sitting there still, straight face, it's a lot easier to accomplish. And then, it was able to take in all the light it needed, and they were able to get the picture out of it. But yeah.
Well, tell us about the video camera. How did my people invent that? I'm
So
French.
the video camera, and I can't remember this particular I know what like some of the very first filmmakers came out of France. As far as like the inventors of the camera, though, it might have been somewhere else, but I know it was Europe.
Okay.
And
I can roll with
it was a bunch of rich people
that. No, you're kidding.
that got together, and they were into horse racing.
Okay.
And they got into this debate one time, and they said, and you had some of the people who were saying, when a horse runs, all 4 of their legs leave the ground at some point. And you had another guy that was like, no, that doesn't happen. All of their legs stay on the ground. There's always a leg touching the ground.
Right.
So they had an argument. So the way that they were able to solve this argument is they took a bunch of cameras and they put them up against the track. And as the horse ran past, all the cameras would go off as the horse would run past it.
Oh,
So
interesting.
then,
There were picture cameras, a bunch of picture cameras.
bunch of picture cameras. So then they found out that if you played these pictures as they were going through the slideshow,
If you flip them one after another,
and if you do it fast enough,
It looks like the
makes
horse
it
is
look
running.
like it's moving. And that was the start of it. Now where it went from,
Interesting.
and then somebody was like, "Oh, we can like make a device out of this."
so they
And
just
then
made
they
a
did.
device that shot a bunch of pictures over and over. Because really, a
That's all it is,
camcorder
yeah.
is just it just shoots a bunch of pictures, a bunch of frames,
Yes.
over and over and over and over and over, and then
Exactly.
plays them. Mm-hmm. Even to this day, right? Even like a digital camera, that's still in essence what it's doing.
Yes,
it's just picking up
100%.
frame after frame after frame.
Yep, it's just taking a bunch of pictures.
That's cool.
That's how they did it.
That's cool.
And then it was some of the first filmmakers ever were the Luminaire, I think it's Lumiere brothers. But-
Lumiere.
Lumiere. With some phlegm at the end.
Lumiere.
But they were some of the first filmmakers. And one of the first films that they did that they actually showed in a theater to people was, it wasn't of any, there wasn't a story or anything. It was simply just, they had a camera. It was angled at like a train station where you had like the track coming in at like almost like I'd say like a 45-degree angle into the picture. And then you could see the people on the right side waiting for the train to come in. Well, so the train started to come in, and people in the theater literally screamed and jumped because they thought it's in the history books, because they thought the train was going to come out and hit them. Nobody had ever seen a moving video before.
They're like, what the fuck is this?
Nobody ever saw that stuff before. So when they started to see this train coming in, there were people who literally like flinched and like got up because they didn't know what the fuck was happening.
How funny.
Yeah, it was like witchcraft to them.
Witchcraft. Burn them all.
So there was one of the first, I think, if you go onto YouTube, I think you can actually find the very first at least that we have recorded, video footage ever. And it's literally it's sometime in the 1800s, somewhere in Europe. And it looks like people coming out of like a commune or like a church or something like that. But it's just like 20 seconds of a bunch of people walking out of this, like walking in and out of this
That's the first thing
place.
someone chose to record ever.
Well, if it was just testing, sure. I mean, I'm sure they created some testing. I'm sure they just created something and they were like, hey, let's set it up here and see how well it works, you know?
Probably. And then they're like, oh shit, it worked.
Yeah.
Save that.
Save that forever. Put it on a hard drive. What's a hard drive, sir? Don't worry about it.
You'll know in 100 or so years.
You'll know about it. You know, it's funny. I was just talking about this today with you, but come the 2020s, we're going to be at a point where there are going to be films you can go back and watch, and they're going to be 100 years old.
Yeah, like Charlie Chaplin and stuff.
Charlie
right?
Chaplin, sure.
Those will be like 100 years old.
Yeah, I think the first like silent film came out in like, I want to say 1922, 23.
Sounds correct.
So around,
I don't know
like,
exactly, but I mean it sounds correct.
So like around.
I know in the game, the movies.
Mm-hmm.
If that has any historical value whatsoever, you start in the year 1990.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know if that, or I'm sorry, 1920.
20s. Yeah.
Yes.
I was gonna say, I was like, I don't think that's right. But
My brain was seeing 1920s, 1920.
But that's when like Chaplin started to make movies. Chaplin started more in the 30s, but that's when you got things like Nosferatu, and a lot of the Germans made some of the first silent films.
Who was that?
Nosferatu. You'd recognize him if I showed you a picture of him, but he's like the first like on-camera vampire.
Does he have a crazy mustache?
No. He looks like a crazy like monster vampire kind of thing. It was a silent film though.
Oh, is he bald?
But yeah, he's bald.
Oh, I know you're talking
Has
about.
like pointy ears.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But that was like that was a German film. Germans were really big at making these like dark, like silent films.
Creepy.
Yeah, it was quite funny. But it's funny
like
actually
Addams Family-esque.
how. Oh, much darker than that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there are some films I go back.
You said dark, and I was like, Addams Family?
Addams Family. That's definitely darker.
That's as dark as I get.
But like, oh man, there was one silent film I watched that actually the villain, the Joker from the Batman, is actually based off of the main character from this movie, and it was a silent film. I think it's German, and it's called The Man Who Smiles, and it's about this guy who had this like curse put on him by a gypsy, where he just always had this giant smile on his face, and you could never not smile. So
well, luckily, it takes less muscles to smile than it does to frown. So he wasn't working the hardest he had to.
Oh, well, there you go.
saying.
Silver lining in everything. But
anyway,
I had watched this film.
That's what the Joker was based off of.
That was the Joker was based off
cool.
of. But I watched this film, and dude, it was just fucking dark.
Yeah.
it is a.
You're like, what
dark,
did I just watch?
Yeah, like for sure. There
Why
was like
did I do that?
There was like a clip I watched where it was this guy, almost like, because at some point he's like in a circus, like a freak show kind of thing, and there was this guy introducing him. But remember, it's silent film. Everybody's used to theater at this point, so everybody's very over the top with their acting and stuff. And there was this gentleman that's like basically introducing him. You know how they used to do, like they'd show clips and then they'd go to like a subtitle screen to show what they're saying and stuff. So like this guy was just like tears down his face and just looked so distraught. It's just then they have like the music behind it, and it's just super fucking creepy. And you're just like,
Super
Jesus
weird.
Christ, like come on, guys.
I bet in Germany at the time it was totally normal.
Oh, I'm sure it was. They made a lot of fucking films like that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of weird ones out there, dude.
But I mean, look where they've brought us to. Look where we are today.
They've brought us possible live action Zelda movies.
There would be no new media had there not been old media.
Yeah,
right?
dude. And it's I'm very interested to see where the train's gonna take us, man.
Choo choo.
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we are at our time for the day.
I'm shocked it's already been an hour, to tell you the truth.
Honestly, I am too. I was expecting. So as we get to the end here, or when we feel like it's the end, I put my the laptop we record the sound on, I put it on black, and then we'll like lighten the screen to find out what time we're at. And I was expecting us to be at like 45 minutes or
Me too.
something.
When I saw the hour, I was like, whoa.
I was like, oh, we're here. Here we are.
Hey, you know, when you're good, you're good.
When you're good, you're good. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. Remember, you can follow us on all the social media platforms. And remember, we do have a Patreon, www.patreon.com/hardlymillennial. And any final thoughts, Matthew?
I can't wait to do this again tomorrow. I'm so excited.
Me too.
Make sure you're here, guys. See you there.
Bye-bye.
Bye.